Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Some Spoiled, A Song of Ice and Fire 2, the co-host Switcheroony, the rereading, Return to Westeros, HBO Spoiler Edition, uncut, uncensored, and too hot for television. Bringing you the greatest hits from 1998. Call in with your requests now. In this episode, we are covering chapters 48 and 49, Jon and Catelyn. In these chapters, we check back in with Jon, whom we have not seen in a minute. And he has finally made it back to Castle Black, but he has some injuries, and they're both physical and spiritual. Catelyn, meanwhile, is walking into a trap, and we just have to watch her do it.
Yeah, and she knows it, too.
She knows it. Welcome to Unspoiled.
Monsters are dangerous, and just now, kings are dying like flies.
I am the king!
Fuck the king.
Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha.
I'm Rashawn.
So, Jon's chapter, I had forgotten because, it's been a while since we had done the book. And so for some of these folks, we haven't visited with them again in months.
Mm-hmm.
But I had forgotten just how long it is from when Jon flees to when we see him again.
Yeah.
So I genuinely was like, oh, right. What's he up to? Oh, right.
It's funny because the last two chapters we talked about how much of these books is people fucking just getting from A to B.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you what, it was like Martin was aware of that because we got two chapters in a row of people actually getting to their destination. So
yes.
There was a lot of relief for me in both of these, being like, oh, thank fucking God, he's finally back at Castle Black. It's about fucking time. And then the very next chapter being them showing up at the twins and like getting there and me being like, oh my God, thank God. Even though I don't want them to be there because nothing good is coming of this, I was still like,
but we're gonna get it over with.
At least we
finally.
Are inside out of the elements. It was just a lot. I was very cold and wet and very chilly for the last several chapters, and I was like, God, I think we're inside. My clothes are soaking wet. I can't wait to get out of these.
I do love that when something is able to make you feel it. That's just a talent that I hope someday to be able to display myself. I'm like, did you hate these chapters? Did they make you uncomfortable? Oh, thank you so much. That really means a lot to me.
Good. That's what I was going for.
Exactly. So yeah, Jon is heading out, and it says the chapter starts with the mare was blown, but Jon could not let up on her.
I know.
Like,
what an interesting
first of
turn
all,
of phrase.
Yeah, I don't care for that phrasing at all. Secondly, it's things like this that make me realize, like, I feel like I would have had a hard time living in an era where you had to depend on animals for things and be willing to push them beyond their comfort level to get what you needed out of them.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's one thing to need to just butcher an animal to eat. That's like quick and done, and it's over. And there's just a very specific like start and end point to that I can understand and appreciate. But when it's this sort of thing where you have to like, even in Sam's chapter, they're talking about the horse that finally just died of starvation and having to ride that horse until she literally dropped and couldn't go on.
Yeah.
And I just don't think I would have it in me.
Don't think you could just drive an animal to its death? You don't.
I couldn't, even if my life depended on it. I don't think I could do it, And there's a point here where like, I'm really relieved that George reminds us that his wounded leg is hurting him, because a part of me wanted to be like, get the fuck off the horse and run then, sir. Go do your own goddamn legwork. And then I was like, oh, right, you can't do that. Ugh, fine, I guess. But I was really kind of judging him for a minute.
She was over here standing with Peter.
A little bit.
And like, nobody wants to do that.
God. Oh, there was a time, y'all, when I was a vegan and I was a PETA member. Oh. And that was a whole phase.
Being fucking a member of PETA is like fucking having a membership to that fucking satanic temple, whatever.
Oh, God. Yeah, fair.
Like, it's not,
for those who don't know, that satanic temple is not doing the good things you may think, and you want to research that a little bit.
Yep. It is not the organization that you think it is.
Yeah. So he is thinking about his friends. He's thinking about Ygritte, and he's sort of like judging himself as much for sleeping with her as he is for leaving her.
Yeah. I also had forgotten just how much happened that Jon didn't know about. So this chapter is him getting caught up to speed to a lot of shit that went down that he just was completely unaware of. And I had really forgotten how out of the loop he was, because he was doing this whole other fucking super double agent, deal. So they have to tell him about what happened to fucking Mormont, about the mutiny. He has to hear about Winterfell being burned. And I thought he knew about the boys already, Bran and Rickon. He had already known about that.
Mm-mm.
Didn't he hear about that?
No, he didn't. Aemon has to tell him that in this
chapter.
chapter.
Is that news too? Okay. Why did I think he already knew about that? What am I thinking of that he knew about?
I don't know.
Oh my God, you guys. I'm so sorry. I'm thinking about the news about Ned and all that. That was the bad news he got when he was thinking about leaving ages ago.
Oh, when he got on his horse and had to decide if he was gotcha.
The last big news he got from like what was going on in the rest of the world. That was forever ago.
Yeah, he's late.
Yeah, so he's just getting bombarded with all this bad news that we have been suffering under for like 2 books now.
Yeah, so he gets to Castle Black and we get a big description of how it looks and how familiar it feels. And the first person he comes across is Donal Noy, the blacksmith. And the news about him having been part of the wildlings actually had reached them.
Yeah.
So when he comes in, Donal Noy is like, he's not antagonistic or anything, but he's very guarded and sort of like, hey man, so are these rumors true? Like, how should I be treating you right now? What is your deal exactly?
And I had forgotten that Jon's face was all fucked up. Mm-hmm. And that's something that we don't get in the show. Like, his face is never really fucked up.
No, he's got some very strategically placed sexy slashes.
Right? But in the book, because Donald was like, yo, your fucking face. What the fuck, dude? Mm-hmm. And Jon has to be like, oh, that's right.
He's like, I was too focused on my fucked up leg to remember my fucked up face.
And he's just like, oh, yeah, that's right. A skin changer tried to rip my eye out. And he says it like so casually. And you have to, and like Donald doesn't have like a really big reaction to it. But you kind of got to be like, in his head, he must have been like, a what tried to do what now?
A what?
A skin changer. You just saying that shit all matter of fact. Are we all supposed to understand that they really exist? Like, Jon is just out here talking about magic. Like, yeah, it's no big deal.
That's one of my favorite things is people just saying wild shit in a tone of voice like you just take it for granted. I was talking to my mom the other day, and we were talking about my dad and how he could be like really difficult. This is the kindest way to put this. And she was telling me that when they were first dating or first married, and this was back in the days where he was dealing and he was in with some rough folks. And some guy said something that pissed him off. And apparently they're talking about this. And my dad just casually, as he's pouring cream into his coffee, said, yeah, I almost went and burned his house down.
Why does your dad sound like my mom, though?
that man, and my mom's telling me this, and I lost my shit laughing. I just could not, because like that is something that I would say as a joke, just like, oh man, I should burn his fucking house down. And to think that I was like, I am my sire is a man who genuinely approached problems with that intent and was like, yeah, it was kind of like raining that day. I thought it would take too long to catch, so I just didn't do it. Yeah. Like, I don't know why he didn't, but for whatever the reason, he didn't. And I have to imagine it was something just as petty that caused him to not do it as what was going to cause him to do it.
I love to think that only reason he didn't do it is because logistically it was going to be a pain in the ass. That it wasn't a turn of like, oh, I can't do that. That's really wrong. It wasn't that at all. It was more like
not that for sure.
Oh, but that thing I gotta carry the fucking gasoline in is like that. The handle's broken, and I never went to Home Depot and got a new one. And
yep, that sounds right. And I was like, what had he done to make him so mad? And my mom was just like, I don't even remember. Maybe he owed him some money. And I was like, okay. Probably it was, if I burn his house down, I'm probably never going to see him.
Right? The money he should be paying me, he's going to use to replace the house.
Exactly. Yeah, my dad, difficult customer. So anyway, he then starts to ask, like, where is everybody? And Donald's telling him they're defending the wall. And he's like, yeah, but where? And he says, everywhere. And Jon is like, oh my fucking God.
This is the worst thing you should be doing.
Exact thing that he wants you to do. Like a bunch of chumps. The gate is here. The attack is here. He wants y'all to spread out and diffuse yourselves so that you don't have any way to defend cohesively.
Yep.
Yeah.
And Donald hears this and it's just like, boy, your leg really is drenched in blood, isn't it? Such a weird, like, there's not any real acknowledgement to anything that Jon has just said. And he takes special notice that the arrow that has injured Jon was a wildling arrow. And it sort of suggests that is somehow evidence that Jon can be trusted at this point, you know. Like,
well, if they tried to shoot you,
yeah, you must, that kind of thing. And there's Jon is still like, but the wildlings are coming. They're south of the wall, man. South of the wall.
Poor Jon. He just wants somebody to fucking listen to him. And he's like, you're not reacting with the urgency I really was expecting or hoping for, sir. Can we stay on task? Thank you.
And he's trying to like find out like just how many men do we actually have. It is not an impressive amount of men. Let me just let you guys know, in case you didn't read this far ahead. It does not look good.
No, it sure doesn't.
It's like 40 guys. Most of them injured or infirm. Some of them still very green that haven't been trained yet. It is it's not comforting.
Listen, there's this guy, because he asks, who is Castellan? And he says, Sir Winton, God's preserve him, last night in the castle and all. The thing is, Stout seems to have forgotten, and no one's been rushing to remind him. I suppose I'm as much a commander as we have now. And then we hear about Sir Winton Stout. He had been a good man once, everyone agreed, but he had been 80 years a ranger, and both strength and wits were gone. Once he'd fallen asleep at supper and almost drowned in a bowl of pea soup. That is so can you imagine being a fucking ranger and at the wall, but the manner of death is that you drowned in your dinner at the table? That's some shit after everything you've gone through and survived. Like,
that's some shit they write songs about to like make everybody laugh at the party. Like somebody like, sing us the song of old Sir Winton Stout. And somebody is like, what's the guy's name? Fucking Tom Seven Strings or whatever whips out his fucking mandolin or whatever and starts singing.
God, the poor guy. He's doing his best.
Like, it's really everybody else's fault for making him, anything at this point in his life. They should have just fucking left him alone to eat his soup.
Very much.
And he also asked about ghosts. Where's your wall? And we find out that Ghost has not made it back to the wall yet, which I was a little bummed out about. I thought for sure that he would be there to greet Jon. I really wanted that to be how that played.
Yep. Yeah, Jon is also kind of like, God damn it, I really thought I would see him here.
Yes, I'm concerned. And I don't know much about what happens with Ghost in the books, and I can't remember. I know that there was a whole thing with the show because we were all very upset about it when Ghost just sort of like disappeared for several seasons.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if there's a similar disappearing act in the books. I feel like I feel what in the world? Oh, okay.
What?
Sorry, my phone was just going nuts. I was trying to figure out what was happening, but it's fine. A lot of the talk around the show, if I remember, about Ghost not being on the show was presented like, oh, it was cost prohibitive and the CGI was so expensive. They just, opted to cut those bits, which leads me to believe that in the book, Ghost is around more because it seemed like people watching were surprised about his absence.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take that to mean that Ghost does show back up much earlier in the books than he does on the TV show. And for that, I am excited.
Fair. All right. I appreciate this approach. Very logical. So yeah, he gets led to Maester Aemon because of his injuries and begins to explain exactly what's going on. I was with them. Corin Halfhand commanded me to join them. And as he's explaining all of this, Aemon's like poking and prodding at his wounds to see what's going on with them. And Jon is trying really hard to like keep it together and not scream. And he asks where Mormont was. And this is when he finds out he was murdered at Craster's Keep at the hands of his sworn brothers.
Oh, yeah. Jon is like devastated. Can't get over it. It says that his words hurt 100 times worse than Aemon's words hurt 100 times worse than his fingers, which by itself as a sentence isn't great. But we all know what he means.
Ma'am.
Right?
I implore you. And yeah, when he asks like who did it, Aemon is basically like, you know who the fuck did it. The fucking creeps. Because we're all like, we used to have creeps that were sent up here, but we had enough good men to keep them in line, and now we don't have that balance anymore.
Yep.
So the creeps took over.
Yep. It was bound to happen, right? They kept just funneling these degenerates to the wall. And eventually they just, got outnumbered. And we find out that about a dozen what he calls true men came back. And one of those that are mentioned is Dolores Ed has made it back. And Giant has made it back. And the Aurochs have made it back. But it wasn't a lot. Of the 100 or 200 people that left with Mormont, like a handful came back.
Yeah.
That is unfortunate.
It's bad. The word is bad.
Yeah, it's
That's
bad.
The word
it's real bad.
Yeah. And he asks like, who is in charge now then? Is it like Bowen Marsh? And he says, yeah, until we can have an election, which he calls a choosing. And
meanwhile, Jon is like, choose between fucking who?
Exactly. Just there is not a lot of options, actually. So this is when the maester is like, all right, we're going to bring you some milk of the poppy. And Jon tries to be like, I don't need it. And Aemon's like, oh, you will.
Yeah, you're going to need it.
So sit the fuck down.
I love it.
Ahead.
Aemon is just like, yeah, you need it. This is going to fucking hurt. Just like tells him right out, it's going to hurt. And yeah, it's real bad. His wound is a mess. Aemon has to get all up in there. And they have to hold Jon down. And Jon is still trying to talk throughout all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And he's really going on and on about the Magnar. And there's a weird little side conversation that has to happen because Noi is mistaken about which Magnar that Jon is talking about.
Yeah.
And thinks that he's talking about like a house, an old house. And Aemon has to be like, yeah, no, I think he's using the word a little differently.
Yeah, this was interesting. I hadn't really like realized that the word was being used as an actual like surname now. But I kind of like that because that's like how language works a lot of the time. Is something that means one thing then begins to be used in a way that's like a formal, like a proper noun. But he's explaining all of this because like talking keeps his mind off of how much his leg is hurting. And this is when he mentions that they are looking for the Horn of Winter, and Aemon's like, wait, the fairy tale? Like they think it's real? And Jon's like, they sure do.
Yeah.
And Ygritte told me about all of the like graves they desecrated, and Donald Noyle is like, and who's Ygritte? And Jon starts to be like, she's this girl, and finally he's just like, I fucked her. I fucked her, and I shouldn't have done it, but also I was following orders, but I just
he's also like really high. That milk of the poppy is starting to hit, and he has a moment of being like, how can I tell them, how can I explain Ygritte to them, like everything about her, I can't just she was all of these things, how do I explain that to them? And then like you said, he starts kind of trying to play it off like she's just a free woman that he knew. And halfway through, he just buckles and starts wallowing in, how conflicted he is about breaking his vow. And they're just
and then Maester Aemon distracts him real well by being like, so this red hot knife that's been sitting in the fire here is going to be pressed against your leg. And Jon's like, all right, I'm not going to scream. But he does scream.
Yeah. And then he faints, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Honestly, good for him.
Yeah,
that's the way.
If there's anything that you can do in that situation to make it better, I think feigning is like at the top of the list. And so by the time he wakes up, everything is over. He's been wrapped up in bandages, and he's just kind of laying there high, dreaming of Ygritte.
Yeah, bless him. And he wakes up, and his friends are here. And he's finding out who's still with them. Yeah. And they name all these folks, but Sam isn't one of them.
Yeah, he ends up having to just ask, like, what's up with Sam? And they tell him about Sam the Slayer and wants to know what happened to him after that. And they have to admit to Jon that they left him behind because he did the thing. And he's in there, and I think it's Pip that's talking, and he's just like, remember how he used to do where he would just curl up in a ball? Do you remember that? Well,
it's Gren.
Is it Gren? Yeah. He's like, and that is what he did, and we couldn't move him. Like, he just would not be moved, and there was nothing else we could do. We had to leave him behind. And Jon is incensed that they left him. How could you leave him
really
behind?
Appreciate that they told him the truth, because I thought they might lie about what happened and say, like, we saw him go down, because saying they left him, that's a real, like, a confession to something that a lot of people wouldn't want to admit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I kind of respect the fact that they just tell him. And they try to do he might still be alive kind of thing, but still they're being honest. And I don't know. It made me think a little bit more of them. That they were straight with him about it.
Yeah, I mean, because it's not like they have to be worried about a lot of witnesses coming and proving that they were lying. They're one of the few that made it out. And it doesn't feel reasonable that they really believe in any way that Sam has made it.
No.
So the fact that they chose to be truthful with Jon, it does say a lot about them. It's funny, like just a page before when I guess it's Aemon talking to Jon about who made it back, and Aemon says about 12 true men, and you think that, well, that's just what you call them because they came back and they're telling you what happened and they're telling you that they weren't a part of it, but how do we know for sure, right? But then you have this moment that happens right away where they are being really honest when they don't have to be. And it feels very much like, oh yeah, because you know what? These guys like are for real. You know, these men they do have some integrity. You know, that fucking cliche thing about what integrity is, when you do the right thing even when no one is watching. You know what I mean? Like when you tell the truth when you could get away with a lie, that kind of thing. Also, I think they're able to tell the truth here because while there might be a certain amount of shame about not being able to save Sam, they really feel like Sam made a choice here, though.
Yeah.
You know, like it wasn't like Sam got hurt and they left him behind. You know, Sam.
Yeah. They were offering their help and he was like rejecting it.
So there doesn't seem to be the kind of shame that would make somebody try to lie to cover up, because they don't feel necessarily guilty. They feel bad, but they don't feel like they necessarily did anything wrong. So there's no reason to lie. And you know what?
Yeah.
You guys know I love Sam, right? But I don't think he's wrong here. You know?
Yeah, no, I understand what you mean. Like, there's only so much you can do for a person. And if they aren't going to be able to, like, help themselves along, you can't be asked to just let yourself die. Like, for the sake of maybe getting them to stand up on their own 2 feet. Which may sound harsh, but you know what? Like, oh well.
Yeah. And this is when when Jon asks about Winterfell. He wants to know. He doesn't even ask like what's going on with Winterfell. He asks like, have you sent word to Winterfell? Because that's like you know what he expects to happen next. And they have to be like, oh shit, no one has told him yet. He doesn't know.
This sucks.
Yeah. Then he finds out like what the fuck happened and who the fuck did it. Yeah.
Winterfell is no more, and your brothers are dead, and they died at Theon Greyjoy's hands. Gren says your brothers were avenged. The Bolton's son killed all the Ironmen, and it said he's flaying Theon Greyjoy inch by inch for what he did. So
the lies are
some more evidence of that later.
Yeah, right. The lie is like taking on its life of its own, and it's spreading, you know, throughout the lands. This lie of Bolton and what he's done to Theon and who was how they were avenged and the reasons behind it, as opposed as though Ramsay Bolton did it as justice, you know, as opposed to their own fucking agenda that they have that is not common knowledge just yet. Which really sucks, like to know, like, you know, reading this, but knowing what's coming and knowing what's like, that it's not, everything isn't what it seems. It's really weird to read.
Yeah,
people
definitely
talking about Bolton like he's, you know,
the savior.
God forbid, a savior, like he's a good guy. He's on our side if we picked a side, you know. And Jon is just like, you know what? I never fucking liked Theon anyway. So fuck that dude. But also,
yeah, there was a big part of me that was cracking up about that. Just like, oh, that motherfucker. And he's not like, oh, I should have known. It's just, I would never have expected him to do that. I didn't like him, and he seemed kind of like a piece of shit. But this is far beyond what I thought he would be capable of.
You know, like, I didn't like him, but he was my father's ward. And that quick little, but he was my father's ward, it feels like it's really laden with different ideas, you know. I never thought he could be like this despicable, you know. The fact that he was my father's ward, I expected better of him, out of respect for our father, you know.
Yeah.
And it is just like this whole quick passage is just filled with like not just disappointment, but like, I can't believe that this motherfucker was worse than I thought he was.
Yeah.
Like, he managed to be even worse than I already thought he was.
Indeed. And he won't believe it at first. He's just like, no, there has to be some kind of mistake. And he describes the direwolf he saw that he definitely took as Bran's direwolf. And then is like, well, if he's dead, maybe a part of him has survived inside his direwolf, like worked for the other skin changer guy. Is that something potentially that could have happened? And again, I just really appreciate Jon's like mindset, being so willing to just embrace the magic aspect of stuff. And to see the fact that he saw this direwolf as evidence in and of itself that Bran is still alive, and that this the events as they're describing them can't be true.
Yeah, I like to think that in this moment when he talks about the direwolf, because it goes like, the sentence is really weird and kind of half stuttered, because Jon is, you know, going through all this pain and is also like all high and shit, so his thoughts are like not like super coherent. But he thinks, no, there's got to be a mistake, because I saw a gray direwolf. It was gray and it knew me. So like that first bit is this, what you're telling me about Bran can't be true, because I saw his direwolf. But then it really segues into the supernatural, where it's like, okay, maybe it's not evidence that Bran is alive proper, but maybe there's a part of him that's still alive because I saw the direwolf, right? It's just like a very fluid kind of train of thought that goes from the more like sort of concrete reality of, no, Bran must still be alive, to this sort of openness to there being like an in-between where Bran is alive only in the direwolf. And he's just really open to both ideas.
Yeah, I just considering how resistant so many people are in these books to just admitting what's in front of them. The fact that Jon is so adaptable in this way to just being like, well, I've seen a lot of shit I don't get, so I'm just going to go ahead and assume more shit that I don't get probably is possible.
And what I love that, because that's just really how that shit works in real life too, though, right? You know, like, it's so easy for all these people who haven't seen magic up close yet to just be in denial about it. But once you've seen some shit, it's really difficult to go back to pretending like it doesn't exist. Some people are manage to pull it off. You know, there are people that get faced with something that they didn't think was possible, and they just reject it and double down, right? But Jon is like, oh, I've been out in these streets and I've seen some things, and I can't go back to pretending like I didn't see them, you know, even if that would be a much more comfortable place to live. I just can't go back to that. It's like having, what did they say, when the scales fall from your eyes and all that jazz?
Yes, such a weird turn of phrase, but yes, exactly. So then he falls asleep again, dreams of Ygritte, and they're in the like hot pool again, but her flesh sloughs off as if she's like being boiled alive. And that's the way the chapter ends. And I was just like, well,
his father is watching. His Ned is watching them in this pool. Yeah. And he can't, like, she's trying to embrace him and kiss him, and he can't, because his father is watching. And then the last thing he thinks is that he is not going to father a bastard. He's not going to do what his father did. And Ygritte is just like, yeah, you know nothing.
It's wild that in his dream, basically somebody's like, dude, that's not how that went. Like, Jon shouldn't know that for his subconscious to create this moment. But it's like, it feels very much like there is an outside force of trying to tell him something, you know, but it's not detailed enough. And she says, you know nothing, so often that it can easily be sort of hand waved as just, oh, she's just saying her catchphrase.
Right.
I didn't do it. Say the thing. But it feels like this is Jon's subconscious being like, oh, you know that's not how it went, though. And I'm just like, how can he know that that's not how it went? He doesn't have any other information. But okay, yeah. So, Catelyn. They come to the twins, and this chapter is just so full of dread.
Yeah.
And it is agonizing to read.
I read this chapter knowing full well how this ends. I, at one point, was like, yeah, y'all need to make sure you eat something right away. Make sure you eat,
right.
And then when they finally do feed them, and she is like, okay, good, now I feel safe. For like a split second, I was like, I'm so glad that they fed you. Because I had that quickly forgotten that it does not fucking matter. But the way she is invested and trusting in this long-held tradition, you know, guest rights are a real fucking thing, and they are supposed to mean something. And it's so wild because we do that with so many things in our real lives. You know, we just sort of adhere to these conventions like they are matter. Like these conventions are what makes shit work. Which is the opposite is true. They only are held up because we continue to hold them up. All it takes is for one person to be like, nah, I'm not doing that. And then they become meaningless. But Kat is just like, we are safe. And all of the gut feelings I have about how this is all bullshit, I can put all of that anxiety to the side. Because we have been guaranteed safety because they just fed us. And it's so... Like, it sounds insane. Like, that means nothing, right? It's so easy to be like, guest rights. Psh, what? Girl, please. Exactly. But how many different ways do we engage in the same kind of behavior every day? That's why we're always so shocked when somebody does something that we think goes against the social contract. You know, we're always like, oh, my God, they shut up a school. How could they do that? We don't shoot up schools. Ma'am, all it takes to shoot up the school is somebody with a gun who goes to a school and decides to shoot. And now it's like a reality for us, right? But it wasn't always, you know? Like, the very first time that shit happened, we were all like, what the fuck? They're shooting like, the people have been shooting everywhere this entire history of this country, you know, every day. But we didn't shoot up schools because we had all agreed.
We all agreed
that you just don't do that. Until one day somebody was like, fuck that, why not?
But what if we did it?
And then it's a thing. Now it's a thing. Yeah. So it's easy to sit in judgment of being like, oh, she thinks they're safe because they had food. But yeah, she thought they were safe because that was the rule we all agreed to abide by.
Exactly. Yeah. So they come up. It's still pouring rain. They are just in bad shape. And Catelyn is like, warning Robb to be prepared for a series of small insults and for them to try to provoke him. And Robb is just like, I know that we need him. I know that he's going to be petty and try shit. You have got to chill out, Mom. And I just wanted to be like, look, Robb, I get that you know it and all, but like,
but do you?
You fucking did what you did, sir. Yeah. So I feel like you don't.
Yeah, you kind of deserve this talk. You have earned this talk, but from the way you have behaved in the past, you can act all like dismissive and like she's telling you shit you already know and like she's being a pain in the ass. But the way you have behaved, sir, like, why would I trust you? You have shown you can't really be trusted. I love too that because of all the rain, the river is especially like hostile and wouldn't be able to be crossed.
Yeah. Yes.
It just really heightens just how much they need him. Like they needed him before because the river is hard to cross just on GP. But it is especially difficult right now.
Yeah, it kind of feels like they're being toyed with by like a higher power here. Who's just like, you know what? I know he needs him, but what if I made him like need him?
Right, exactly.
So yeah, they get greeted, but not by Walder himself, which Catelyn isn't really sure how to interpret. She says to Robb very quickly, like, the man is 90 fucking years old. Yeah. Of course, he didn't come out in the rain, but she's not sure of that.
And then she thinks to herself, but he used to get carried out all the time. Like, that was his jam. He's all about, like, being ostentatious and, you know, being paraded around. So even though she tells Rob it's not a big deal, secretly she's like, this is not a great sign.
Yeah. It's not a big deal. It's not a big deal, except for the fact that I think it's actually
It's kind of
quite
a big deal.
maybe.
This whole meeting with the two guys that show up too.
Yeah.
I forget the name of the two guys. Like one of them is like Black Walder, I think maybe. And then I'm not sure who the other guy is.
Let's see. We got Sir Ryman. The first two guys, there's, let's see. Edwin is the eldest, the pale, slender man with the constipated look. The wiry one with the beard is Black Walder, a nasty bit of business. Peter is on the bay, the lad with the unfortunate face. Peter Pimple, his brothers call him. And
so that's who it is.
I just have to mention that the fucking audiobook, he decides to do the Petire thing.
Oh.
So it's Petire Pimple, which I don't know why, but that is just worse. It just is worse. And I don't like it. But yeah, so
also that he got married when he was 10. Like it's not like a huge deal, but it's thrown in there, and I'm just like, wait, what happened? Married him when he was 10 to a 30-year-old woman, and that's and that's the father of the girl that is betrothed to Edmure, is this Peter Pimple guy.
Edmure is just like, oh God, is she gonna look like him? Oh no.
Edmure, this whole chapter is like, but what about my wife though? Like, because there's a whole parade of free women, girls, granddaughters, bastard daughters, and all manner, and it is not a impressive lot.
Yeah.
And then finally,
it's a bad look.
Finally, they let him see this Rosalind girl, and she turns out to be quite pretty, almost too pretty, to the point where they suspect that because she's so frail, she's probably sickly and maybe even barren, and that's the only reason.
Hold on, you're jumping ahead too far.
Oh, sorry.
Because before they go inside, we have Rob's wolf acting up quite a bit.
Right.
And they kind of do the whole like, oh, is this how you come to make amends? Turn it into a whole thing. But it's just evidence that his wolf is aware shit is not right here. Mm-hmm. He's feeling the vibes are off. And the way that this continues, like there's a point later at which he really begins to act up again. And Rob finally is like, all right, I'm just not going to be able to take him inside if he's acting like this.
And he chooses Westerling to be the one to go take Grey Wind away, which Catelyn catches and remarks that this is smart because that way Jane's father will not be around Walder Frey either and won't be like a target in a way to antagonize the situation. And she's like, that's very smart of you.
And I think it's really interesting that so often the moments where things start to go really wrong for the Starks, those moments will start with them having to send their wolves away somehow. Mm-hmm. And it depends, of course. It's not always the case. But the fact that he decides to leave Grey Wind outside and ignore the signals that he's getting from his wolf, this is just... I feel like Rob a couple years ago would have heeded this a little bit more, and he has gotten so enmeshed in everything now and is looking at things in such a sort of conventional way.
Is a really interesting point that you bring up, because my question then becomes, if Rob pays attention to this and picks up on the vibes and realizes none of this is what it seems, and that they should probably not be here because that's how bad it is. They are not, like, literally not safe here. How does he then act on that? I feel like his mother would lose her shit. You're going to insult the Freys again. Don't you see how badly we need them? You're going to welch a second time with this guy. Like, I'm really curious how Rob could have... I mean, he's king. He could have just laid down the law, right? But we've seen enough that we know that nothing is ever as simple as just like decreeing something, you know?
Right, sure.
He's going to have all of these people looking to him, all these people that are following him as king, and he has to make it so that they trust in his choices and trust in his decisions. And how does he communicate to everybody? My dog said the vibes are off. No offense, I know he's a wolf, but y'all know what I'm saying here, right? Like,
yes.
How would he have been able to do anything, even if he had decided, you know what, I don't think this is a good idea. This is all feels wrong. Grey Wind is telling me this is not the move. Does he have any power to change things, or are they already marching down a road and it's too late to turn around? Like that sort of kind of like destiny is happening. Like, Oedipus, all roads lead here. It was never going to be any different, you know?
Right.
I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I'd be interested to hear from listeners what y'all's, like, how you think this might have gone if he had decided that he was going to actually heed what his wolf is telling him. Mm-hmm. How does he do it? How can he do it? Because,
like, if you want to take the sort of fan fiction, say he does manage to just tell everybody, nope, we're out. You know, we're leaving. Mm-hmm. We're not even crossing the fucking river. I can't tell if they've crossed the river yet or not at this point. I feel like they're still yelling across the water to these other people on the other side. Yeah. And they just say, you know what? Nope, we're not crossing. So then what happens is the Red Wedding, that moment doesn't happen. Right? Mm-hmm. So then do the Boltons, are they exposed at this point? I mean, because our side, if you think of the Starks as being our side, they still don't know yet about the treachery. But the Boltons have definitely shown their hand to the Freys and the Lannisters, you know. Does that information come out? Does Rob then become aware that the Boltons are actually traitors? And does it make a difference, or is it already lost at that point because they're so outnumbered? Because without the Boltons, you know, Rob's forces in the north are not what they were. You know, so like ultimately, does it even matter? Like, Rob has already lost the war, I guess is what I'm saying. Right. And I'm wondering, like, even if he avoids the Red Wedding massacre, it's a done deal for him at this point. He can't win this war.
I don't know.
I don't know either.
I don't know. Yeah. It's an interesting question, ma'am. And there's also an interesting thing when they are talking about who's going to be able to participate in the wedding. And they say the bannerman can come shelter and be part of the feast, but the rest of his men can cross and set up their camp beside their own. We will bring out enough casks of wine and ale for all to drink the health of Lord Edmure and his bride. We've thrown up 3 great feast tents on the far bank to provide them with some shelter from the rains. So, yeah, setting up him being like separated from a lot of his people.
Mm-hmm. And they're basically like, well, you know, Walder Frey feels really bad that he can't feed or house everybody. We don't have room for basically our own people, but then also says, but they're not going to be neglected. We actually are going to feed them and shelter them. It's just going to be way out the way.
Right.
So, like, which is it though?
It's not actually feeding though. He basically is like, don't worry, we'll give them plenty of booze.
Oh, you're right. He says 3 great feast tents, and I'm thinking that the tents will be feast, but that's not what they say.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
He says, we've thrown up 3 great feast tents to provide them with shelter from the rain. Doesn't really say anything about any food in there.
No.
So you're right. Don't. Maybe they aren't like double talking, because I felt like they were saying we can't feed everybody, but then we threw up these tents with feast in them, and they're gonna go eat there. And I was like, how can that be both, sir?
So they head inside. And we have the whole thing with all of the daughters being paraded out.
This fucking parade of phrase, y'all. I cannot. It goes on forever. He doesn't even know these bitches' names, which I remember that from the fucking episode because it was a lot.
Yep.
He doesn't know
they
who's
really
called
like
what.
leaned into how bad he is in the show in a way that was very amusing, honestly.
They really did. Finding out later in life that was fucking what the fuck was his name? Filch. Was like, that was such a lovely delight for me later on.
Same. I love it. He's such a perfect casting choice. Like, the show really did cast quite well. They were very good at that.
Yeah, they were very good in it, and it carried over to House of Dragon, in my opinion. The casting was really excellent on that as well.
Yeah.
That is one thing that they seem to get right from these books into the TV shows, I have to say. Which is, I'm glad they get something right.
Honestly. So, and also the mention of this little guy, Jingle Bell. So
yes, this was not on the show, I don't think, at all.
Sure wasn't.
So what is happening here? What is I don't know what to make of this. What is this?
So Jingle Bell is a Frey who was born, and he is like mentally disabled somehow. And is being paraded around in like a fool's crown with little bells on it. And
Catelyn is like, is this shade? This feels like shade. Yeah. This feels like shade to me.
She is trying to interpret what this means that this guy is here, because he has, it's not like he was just born. He's been around, but he was kept out of sight the last time she visited. And the fact that he's like out here front and center like this just seems like it's them saying something.
It definitely does, but what? Like, it's gotta be like, oh, any fool can wear a crown, right? It's gotta be that basic.
Okay.
But I
like it.
I don't know. Like, I feel like that's where Catelyn is going with this. I don't know if that feels like definitely part of it, or at least the most superficial part. But I was curious if there was more going on there. And I feel like, does Catelyn have a question? Or is this only about whether or not Rosalind is healthy? But does she have a moment of wondering, like, are they going to inherit whatever genetic thing happened that caused the developmental delay?
I don't remember that coming up for her, no.
Okay.
The only thing is whether or not the kids survived was her main question.
Okay.
But there's nothing about, like, the mental handicap thing going on.
Okay.
So yeah, so they exchange barbs. Sounds like much more generous because there's no real exchange. Rob just has to sit there and take it and do his best to be graceful under the circumstances. And Walder puts him on the spot to apologize to all of the girls that he slighted by choosing the wife that he did.
I do want to mention that Jingle Bell's real name is Aegon, which would not have been funny to me before House of the Dragon, but now I think it's hysterical.
Yeah, the fucking naming thing in this like universe is just such a joke. I mean, go off, I guess, but why?
I need y'all to stop naming y'all fucking kids Aegon. It keeps not working out well for anybody. Just fucking stop. Stop doing it.
Especially considering that Walder's like, oh, they name all their kids Walder. And I'm just like, well, sir. All right. Whatever. So he has to apologize to all of them. And he says something about like how no words can set right and he says, good. That was very good. No words can set it right. Well said. Well said. At the wedding feast, I hope you will not refuse to dance with my daughters. It would please an old man's heart. And this is when Rosalind is led in, and Edmure is like, oh. And she is described as having like a delicate face and beautiful hair and a tiny waist. And Edmure is just blown away.
Yeah. He's so fucking relieved.
After seeing
really,
the
is what it
parade
is.
of women, after seeing the potential women that he might have been stuck with, he had a real specific fear of what he was going to wind up having to deal with.
Yeah.
And she's crying. And it's an interesting thing because when he's talking to Catelyn later, he's like, what was the deal with her crying? And Catelyn's basically like, she's a maiden and she's about to like have her wedding night. Like, that's to be expected. And I was like, is it? Wow. That is, that's the fact that is just a given is so depressing. Yeah.
She talks about Lysa crying like a crazy person, flooded with tears before she married Jon Arryn. But by the time the ceremony happened, she was beautiful and, vibrant looking.
Yep.
But, that whole like pre-wedding just being filled with like fear and sadness and to the point where you're crying, that doesn't sound like any way to live.
No,
but I
what
guess
are we doing, guys?
I guess if you're like a child and you're being sent off to marry an older man that you don't know, I guess crying is fucking appropriate.
Yep.
It's probably the realest thing of the whole deal. Like the smile and joy of the actual wedding, that's a fucking face you put on, that's just not real. How can it be real? You're marrying a stranger that's probably 20 years older than you.
And here it's like potentially because he asks, why are you crying? And she says, for joy. I weep for joy, my lord. And Lord Walder is like busting and is like, enough. And I'm like, does she know what's going on and is like crying because of that? Is it as simple as what Catelyn thinks, or is it more sinister? I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good question, because it definitely doesn't feel like any of these girls are occupying a position where they would be entrusted with any details about what the plan is. However, this place seems to be filled with Freys that are not like super smart or super careful, very petty, and just walk around saying shit all the fucking time. It would be really plausible that they would have overheard all kinds of shit.
Indeed. So Catelyn, this is when she steps in and is like, we'd really like some food. And Robb is like, and some wine and salt. And he's like, oh, of course. And he eats, she feels better. And then they get led to their rooms, which she was fully expecting to be like really depressing. And they're actually done up really nicely.
Yeah. Walder Frey gives them a nice little sort of like welcome once the food comes out, like, and calls them guests and gives them the whole like, be welcome under my roof and at my table. So it all feels very like above board, like they are engaging in this ritual of welcoming you to my house as a guest. And then Robb like thanks them and accepts the welcome, properly, like thanks them for their hospitality and all that. And it all feels like, all right, well, it was very tense. We weren't sure how this was going to all go down. But now that we've done this ritual, I can relax and I can breathe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very much. And, when they get to their rooms, Catelyn is thinking like we should post our own guards because they have Frey guards outside the rooms. And she keeps on being like, man, I just can't wait till this is all over, frankly. We need to get this done and beat the fuck out of here.
Yeah. And then she's also like, and I'm actually, because I had forgotten too, I'm glad she mentioned it, that she is being whisked away to that Seaguard place. And so she's like, yeah, I really want to be done with all this, but I guess I'll be a comfortable captive at Seaguard, which is kind of like not really, she's not in any hurry to get there. She's in a hurry to get this fucking thing over with, but she's not in a hurry to get to her next destination.
That's true. Yeah. Poor Catelyn. God. So she talks with Edmure here, and he is just kind of like, I don't understand why he picked a pretty one. He had me over a barrel. He's got like all these women, and he could have chosen anyone and been really spiteful. And he picked the prettiest one. there's got to be some kind of catch here.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, maybe she's barren? And Catelyn's like, that doesn't make any sense, because the whole point of him marrying into the Tully family is that he wants his kids to inherit it.
Mm-hmm.
So why would he do that and then choose specifically a wife for you that can't have children? That just doesn't really make any sense.
Yeah, I love this thing. Catelyn says to him, to Edmure, well, everybody knows you're a sucker for a pretty face. Like, that shit is fucking, everybody knows. Mm-hmm. The secret is out on that. And she says that to Edmure, but then inside she's thinking, most likely they didn't want to risk giving you any excuse to back out of the deal.
Yeah. Yeah, and Edmure is just like, I'm just really surprised at how, like, welcoming he's been. I expected. And that leaves Catelyn feeling anxious. And she excuses herself, and she goes and finds the maester and questions him about the Rosalind and, like, whether or not her mother was able to have children consistently, and how many of them lived, and all of this.
Yeah, there's a whole thing where because one of the things that Catelyn is talking about in regards to Rosalind again is just like how slight she is, and there's a whole bit that Catelyn does when she compares Rosalind to some other girls who are taller and sturdier and have wider hips and bigger breasts, all seem like, they're basically built for breeding. And this little girl, Rosalind, doesn't appear to have that at all. And when the maester is trying to convince Catelyn, he like runs off a list of her brothers and sisters. Well, they're all brothers, it turns out. And Catelyn is like, yeah. She had all those kids, but did they live, though? Don't be trying to trick me with your double speak.
She is very careful. I appreciate Catelyn in these chapters, because we know it's heading nowhere good. And she's doing, like, her best to figure out what's off.
Yeah.
It's not like she's an idiot who's totally oblivious to the fact that something isn't right here. It's just that what's wrong is so far beyond what she could imagine that what everything that she's investigating is just proportionally totally off. And I just really, like, feel for her in that she really attempts to do her due diligence. Yeah. Which is something that I often will read things and it feels like there's a lot characters could have done that they don't, because they just decide to ignore their intuition. Right. And she's, like, paying attention to her intuition, but there really isn't. It's like I was saying earlier about, like, it just feels like the ship has already sailed. These things have been put into motion, and there's really not a way to go backwards. It just, like, everything, like the way the river is rushing in the current is going only one way. You can't like make it flow backwards just because you want it to. And it just really feels like this chapter, everything is moving forward, even though she is trying to slow it down and trying to be diligent, trying to be careful, but it doesn't matter. The current is already moving the way it's moving. Yeah. And then they get bleak. They get word that they're Lannisters on the river now. Sir Wendell, his brother, has been taken hostage again. And Bolton has, because they meet up with Bolton here. And Bolton is bringing news that some more news from Winterfell. Other people have died. Clay, Cerwyn, and Tallheart, along with who else? Oh, Roderick, Sir Roderick. Right. Okay. Yeah. So, and Bolton is telling them, what the Ironmen supposedly did, that they burned the house, the castle, and the town. Some people have gone back to the Dreadfort with Ramsay, and this is when Catelyn has been like, yeah, I've been hearing about your fucking son, by the way, and how he's been wilding out. And fucking Bruce is like, look, he's a bastard. I cannot help those depraved parts of him. Please try not to hold it against us. Yes. Yeah, and when he mentions, Rob brings up Theon Greyjoy, this is when Roose takes a strip of leather out from his belt and is like, oh, yeah, so he's been sort of handling Theon, and here's a little token of what he's been up to in that respect. Would you like it? And I love Catelyn just being like, I kind of want it.
She really kind of wants. She knows that it's not seemly and she can't accept it, but in her heart, she's like, yeah, I will fucking take that. Thank you. I also love there's a moment when Roose is talking about Ramsay, talking about like what he's done. He's a good fighter, but yeah, he's tainted and all that. And when he's done, he says, well, when all this is over, the king is going to have to just figure out what he wants to do with Ramsay. But by then, I hope I have a real son, so I don't really fucking give a fuck either way what happens to him. And Kat is just like, God damn, this man is cold as fuck.
Yep.
And she has no idea just how cold he is, but she has this moment of...
She sure doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a mention of the what do you call it? Going down to, who is it? Oh yeah, Duskendale. And Robert Glover, who, the way that Roose Bolton is framing it, Robert was told not to do it. We tried to hold him back. We knew it was a bad idea, but he couldn't be stopped. And again, if you're reading this the first time and really paying close attention, you remember Bolton being the one to give the order for Duskendale way back. But so on the reread, it's like, how did I miss this? But you're pushing through so quickly, and rarely do we, on a first read through, unless we're doing it for something like this project, do you stop and like discuss and consider all these aspects of it. So it's really easy to overlook in the midst of everything just some order Roose Bolton gave that felt very kind of offhanded and not exactly relevant to anything we needed to know. And it was all right there. It was all right there. It's not even like George being sneaky. He is basically like, no, I told you here. I told you here. I had him repeat the thing here that you know isn't true from back there. I mean, you should have known what was going on. I should have. You're right. So he says that he brought 500 horse, 3,000 foot, Dreadfort men in chief, and some from Carhold. And Robb says, that should be enough. You will have command of my rear guard. I mean to start for the neck as soon as my uncle has been wedded and bedded. We're going home.
Yeah. There's also talk about like what they should do with Theon. And they are arguing that they should not murder him and, for justice, but they should keep him alive because he's going to be the heir of the Iron Throne. Is that right? Is that what they call it? No, not the Iron Throne.
The Iron Throne is the Sea Stone Chair.
Is that what they call it? I thought it was something better than that. Oh well. But yeah, he will inherit the Iron Islands, and that he would have a lot more value. And Catelyn is not here for that. She wants him dead. She wants his family dead. She wants his house burned to the ground.
His house burned to the ground. Yep.
So yeah, but yeah, like you said, it ends with Robb being pretty sure they're going to be marching north. There's a whole thing about Clegane as well. I guess he's getting closer.
Yeah, this is I don't know how much to believe this. Yeah, because this is Roose Bolton telling her this.
Yeah, and he's claiming
this is his explanation as to how like a bunch of men got taken out of the equation, and I'm like,
putting himself.
I mean, it very well may be.
Yeah, but he's so full of,
Exactly.
But it works though, because like it feels like everybody is like, that story sounds plausible. Clegane is like very difficult to deal with. It would be, we understand how you could lose a battle to him. You know what I mean? So if this is not true, it's really well played. And invoking the sort of, myth / boogeyman tale that like follows the mountain around. Like he's a perfect person to use if you're going to make up a story like that.
Exactly. Yeah. So here we are.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We are going into the Red Wedding fairly soon. I don't know how many chapters of other POVs before we get there.
But there. It's looming.
It's coming.
Mm-hmm.
Dun, dun, dun.
I would really rather it didn't, but I feel like it's out of my hands at this point.
Do you know that we're only just over halfway through this book?
That can't be right.
Chapter 49, right? And there are 80 chapters.
Jesus Christ.
Let's see, 59%. Yeah.
Well, I suddenly feel like garbage.
It is the Sea Stone chair. Yeah, whoever wins the Sea Stone chair will want Theon Greyjoy dead. Yeah, I forgot about this. Bolton's basically offer to kill him on behalf of whoever pays his ransom because they're going to want him out of the way. What?
I just feel like it was called something else in the show, but that's clearly not true.
I don't think so.
I don't think so either, but for some reason in my head, Sea Stone chair doesn't sound like anything I've heard before. I know I have, but my brain is just is that right? Yes, brain, it's right. Stop being such a cunt. It's right. It's fine.
All right, then. Well, I do want to say hi to new patrons. I also want to mention to everybody that Rashawn and I are going to be taking the 24th off. We record on Saturdays, and the 24th falls on a Saturday, but that's Christmas Eve, as you all know, or maybe you don't. And so we won't be recording that day for holiday reasons. So normally there would be an episode posting on the 30th, but there will not be. So before everybody starts messaging me going, why isn't there an episode up? Listen to the end of the episodes for announcements just like this one, which will help you out when you are wondering why a thing is how it is.
Yeah.
And there's just any time, I have historically really attempted to record through holidays in such a way that episodes went up anyway. And I think a lot of that came from the fact that I saw other podcasts that were managing to always have episodes up year round, even when there were holidays. But then I've come to realize those are shows that post once a week, and just figuring out the one way to fit in this one recording before a holiday, that's not really that difficult. But I am out here dealing with, 11 recordings per week. And fitting all of those in around the holidays, it's going to be a very different proposition. So I've decided to cut myself some slack, and proportionally, you're getting so much more content from Unspoiled that when we do have to take time off for holidays, I feel like the sheer amount that we put out from this network is going to make up for that, hopefully.
There's always something to listen to.
There is always another thing. Yeah. So anyway, with all that said, we have got this week McKimron. We talked about this on Ted Lasso, but it is spelled MCKMRLN. Don't know how to say that, so here we go. We have Nick Hitchcock and Miranda Calhoun, Imperial Lady Rebecca,
nice,
and Shepherd Geek.
Welcome.
Delighted to have you all. Thank you all so much for joining. Hope that you are enjoying the patrons only content and the community on Discord, which of course you can join whether you're a patron or not, but there are big patrons only sections on Discord. And everybody, I just really thank you all for the support. Appreciate you so much.
We do.
And I've been super busy dealing with these puppies lately, and if you want to see more about that, just go to any of my platforms and I will have been posting about it. But as of today, December 3rd, we have 4 puppies remaining who have survived the parvo, and they are all doing really well, and they all seem stout and fit as a fiddle. So I think that we're going to find homes for at least 3 of them.
Yeah.
One of them might be making his permanent home here with us.
One of them is really pushing hard in the paint.
He is.
He's trying real hard. to become an official, unspoiled pet. He is really throwing everything he has. And you guys pray for your girl, because I don't know if she has the fortitude to withstand it. This puppy, man, he's got these eyes on him. I don't know if she can stand up to it. So y'all pray for her.
He's got the eyes. He's got this belly.
This bitch about to have a dog.
I think so. And y'all know, like, if you have heard me talk about it, a puppy is the last thing I wanted. Like, this was not part of the deal.
It
wasn't supposed to be how it went.
But because you are a responsible and conscientious person, you are not taking this lightly. So even though everybody is like, keep him, and your heart is like, I want to keep him, you are really thinking about the totality of this, what it actually will mean for your life. Because you don't do shit like this willy-nilly. Like some people will just get a puppy because it makes them feel good. And next thing you know, you got a dog tied to a tree in the backyard, starving somewhere.
Yep.
And we're not about to fucking do that. So you will be thinking long and hard about this decision. But between me and y'all, this bitch a goner. She got a dog.
I love this whole speech you give, and then you end it with, and now that we have said all the things that are responsible to say, let's all admit what the fuck is actually happening here, and that is, it's over, it's done. You have a dog. Let's all just come to terms and move on. Honestly, that's it. That's the vibe.
I mean,
it's sort of feels like it's already over, but I'm holding on, just trying to be like, but I'm responsible. And I'm really trying to be, but also like, come on. We all know what's happening here. All right, guys. Well, we love you very much, and we will be seeing you next week with a new episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
Bye, guys.
Joffrey, Cersei, Walder Frey, Meryn Trant, Tywin Lannister.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.